We've been wanting to meet you since we saw the first Reparations Show back in, was that July or was it further back?
It was pretty.
The first one was Juneteenth. Maybe you saw it after that.
No, we saw Juneteenth. My calendar has mushed into like, it's just last week now.
Yeah. Right. I hear that. What is time anymore? Nobody knows.
And so we loved it because we were actually looking for a way to celebrate Juneteenth because, well, obviously I'm Black, but Ricky's great grandfather was an escaped slave. And so it was kind of something that's always been important to us to kind of learn both our cultures. And it's funny how that works, right? Like race versus ethnic background. And so it was, when we saw it, we're like, this is a genius idea. So let's start from the beginning. Where did that come from, and what started it, and like when you came up with it, what kind of kept the ball rolling? Because of course there's the idea, but then there's the like getting it off the ground.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I really appreciate that. I have made more theater in my life at the Crane Theater. So I'm 51 and have been in town for, oh my gosh, is today the 28th? No, tomorrow's the 28th.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I will have been in New York City for 25 years.
Wow.
And I moved up from North Carolina, and I make my living as an artist. And I have made more theater in the Crane as a neo-futurist, before the neo, just as an independent artist. Then I was one of the producers of the Fire This Time Festival for 5 years. And then after that, I became the curator of the Queerly Festival with Eras at Frigid and the Crane, basically. And we were in the middle of planning a virtual Queerly. And I mean, I had been dragging my feet with Queerly because I was feeling anxious, and it was, the beginning of the pandemic, and I was also am the only actor I know who kept working when everything shut down, and all of a sudden, all of my work exploded, and so I was just sort of dragging my feet and feeling anxious and trying to figure out what the world was like. And then George Floyd was murdered in the middle of planning Queerly, and Eras. In the midst of all of the messages I received from white people asking how I was and apologizing or whatever, Eras sent me an email and said there must be a way for us to create a show for Black and brown performers where the white performers donate their services to the show. And I said, oh, you mean like a reparations show? And he said, I don't know. I mentioned this to AJ Muhammad, and AJ was sort of like, I'm not sure about that. And I said, no, let's call it the Reparations Show. And then I emailed AJ and was like, what were your reservations with a show called the Reparations Show? And AJ said, I think I was just concerned about if it were a show that Eras created as a white man, what that would look like. And I said, oh, well, he brought it to me, and now it's our show, and that means that it's my show. So I think the Reparations Show. And then then AJ said, yeah, your sense of humor, actually, you're well suited to create something called the Reparations Show. So then we started talking about it. And, a lot of the stuff that we thought the show was going to be when we created it, it is not that, and it's still evolving. We're still a very baby show. It's a baby show, but that is how. So that was the genesis of it. And then I knew who I wanted to host the show for the first 6 or 7 weeks, and I reached out to. Our very first host was Azure D. Osborne Lee, and then Germano Toussaint was, I think, our second host, and then there was me, unless I was before Germano. Anyway. And people started donating. And at one point, Eris said, I can commit to the show through December. And I said, oh, I guess that means I have to keep doing it. And so I think it has just kept going because Eris and I are both very interested in it, and I am interested in it. And in a world where I still have deadlines as an audiobook narrator and as a director and as an actor in these online things, the Reparations Show deadlines feel very much like they're for me. They feel very much like, I mean, this pandemic and the racial unrest have placed me, I think, at the top of my thinking game.
Yeah.
I am more thoughtful than I've ever been. And I think I considered myself thoughtful before all of this, but I feel like I'm in the most thoughtful time of my life. And one of the things that I appreciate about that is that when I turned 50 last year, one of the things I was thinking about was, what am I going to do with the last half of my life? Right? If I plan to live till I'm 100, what am I doing with those 50 years? And what is without children, what is my legacy? And somewhere along the line, I realized that my legacy was about community, about the kinds of community that I create and how I can do that as a theater professional, and how I can do that as a Black man, and how I can do that as a Black queer man. And so the Reparations Show, more than just the discussion around reparations in terms of the money that we could get from the government, or that we'll never get from the government, is about how we are repairing our relationships with one another as a community, and how we're repairing our relationships to ourselves, especially considering we live in a world where even during this pandemic, even during all of this, where every time a benefit is announced, it's the same people. Every time people are said they're going to star in a new show or whatever, it's the same people. The people who won the Tonys, the people who people are fans of already. And even though what I think we've learned from the pandemic is that we're all entitled to the same sort of access to healthcare, to art, to income, to wealth. But still, we are taught to believe that these exceptionalist ideas are real. Like for some reason, Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B are supposed to be competing with one another, when in fact they're entertainers, and they're just entertainers. Like, they're not competing with each other. It is right. We're only allowed to have one of each thing. We had Oprah, and now Oprah's gone. So who's going to replace Oprah as that one famous Black woman? Yeah. And I just, we're taught that that's the thing that we're supposed to worship or idolize. And I only idolize myself. And that is what the Reparations Show is about to me.
It's so funny you say that, because Ricky and I often talk. I watched a play recently about our heroes and who we decide to immortalize, and it's really cool play called Immortal Goats, meaning greatest of all time. And so we're talking about, okay, do you make a statue to Jay-Z? Well, no, Jay-Z wouldn't work. He has some bad stuff in his past. You make a statue to this person. And I realized personally, I've never really had heroes. I never, I think of Whitney Houston, like the greatest love of all. Everybody's searching for a hero. People need someone to look up to. I never found anyone who fulfilled my needs. And it's funny because I just like people. I never thought of like, that's my hero. I thought, I really like Whitney Houston. I really like Janet Jackson. I never thought, they're my heroes. I never put them on the pedestal. And I think that's because, like, when you put Black people on a pedestal, people are ready to rip them down. And it's
Yeah.
just like, it does, like, as soon as, like, oh, Beyonce is one of the greatest singers of all time. Well, let me tell you what's wrong with Beyonce. And it's like, or maybe she's just a really great entertainer and people really love her and you need to stop.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, I I always believed that I was meant to be famous, and that was a thing that I white knuckled my entire career. And not getting a Broadway show, but making history anyway, and not doing, XYZ, not being a series regular on a TV show. I used to feel really bad about those things. And so I started saying, I'm going to carry myself like a star, and that is just the way it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere along the line, I stopped sending, people send GIFs in reaction to things when you're texting people, and everybody's like searching GIFs on Tumblr or whatever and doing that. And then I learned how to make them myself with an app, and thought, I'm never going to GIF anybody but myself, because I'm not going to glorify other people's reactions when I know that I have great reactions too. So I'm always just going to do that on my own, because it also helps me to feel. What I realized this year was that I don't have to participate in the same way that I used to. I don't have to participate by believing that someone is somehow better than I because they've made thousands more dollars than I, or millions more dollars than I, I don't have to feel that way. And so I'm, thank God, not participating in the same way. And I still feel insecurity sometimes. I am working. When I'm finished with you, I'm going back there to my booth, and I'm going to work on an audiobook that needs to be uploaded by the end of the week. I am working. Next week, I'm directing I have a first rehearsal of a play that I'm directing that's actually a short film. And then after that, I'm acting in a short musical online. And those are only 3 things that I am doing besides the Reparations Show each week, right? And so I am working, and I am fine. And then I get emails from people. I get emails from companies that say such and such is in this play, and they're in this, and they're in an email that was sent to my house. And so for a moment, I feel like, why aren't I in that? How come nobody asked me to do that? Why them? Why is it them again? And I have those little moments that I like from the before times where I was jealous of other actors or directors on their paths. But for the most part, I'm not anxious about not being famous enough. I'm not anxious about people looking at me like I'm low rent, like I'm, a poor man's Wayne Brady or whatever the description is. And so I don't even know why I'm talking about this.
That's okay. We were just listening. We will like listen to any story, and it's interesting hearing yours and how the pandemic kind of shifted your mindset. I think one of the things that is both tragic and glorious, and I should lead this by saying we're writing a book about digital theater. It's one of the things we're working on during the pandemic.
That's exciting.
Yeah, we're a little nervous because we're like, it every time we think we have it, something changes, something develops. But oh man,
I think that's the hook of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that will give you several volumes.
Yeah, actually it kind of has already. And one of the good bad things that happened was when Broadway shut down. It was bad because we all miss Broadway and it put actors out of work, and that's terrible, right? But then I saw so many people who had doors either slammed in their face or like they were comparing themselves. They didn't have to now, because they were now the stars, the heads, the owners of their work again. And there was something about that, especially with Black creators. I've seen more Black creators in this craziness than ever before, because like they don't have anybody they got to get past to get
Right.
their work right.
That's right.
There. And that's been the most beautiful thing. That's part of what we're writing in the book, is just how digital theater and Black Lives Matter are almost interwoven in our minds. Like how one allowed Black people more voice, but it also showed the divide financially between people who had and people who didn't have. Like, like one of my friends is a college professor at UCLA, and he talks about how his students who were on scholarship, they would come to school, you couldn't tell they were different from anybody else, and then they would go home and they don't have a computer, and they
Right.
don't have a nice backdrop to stand in front of. And so it definitely was both a blessing and a curse, this whole thing.
Yeah. I'm wondering about, I wondered about all of my friends who are Broadway people and that's all they do, and how they're getting along. I wonder about it. I mean, I ask them too, like, how are you doing? What's going on with you? And um, I have tried to offer people work, and I have offered some work, and I just think, I'm just so pleased that, I mean, I'm one of the lucky ones. I have a great manager, and 20 years ago when I signed with him, we just sort of worked on income streams, like where am I going to get jobs, and how am I going to continue to grow my career? And so there were times when I thought, oh, I should really just, stop doing all these other things and just act and focus on that so that I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not who I am. That has never been my tea, as 'twere. And so it's good that he didn't let me do that. And, I was talking to somebody today about this. My plan before the pandemic was to go to San Francisco. I was going to act in a play, and then I was going to stay at the theater company and then direct a play. And then I was coming back home, and I had applied for a job at the theater and was hoping that they were going to hire me and to be their associate artistic director. And then my partner and I were going to move to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
But that part wasn't definite. The part that was definite was acting in a play, directing a play, then coming back to New York. If I had done that, I would have lost my SAG insurance. I would have lost my equity insurance. And because I'm not in the directors union yet, I would not be gaining any directing insurance or insurance from the directors union. So I was going to lose my insurance to do these two jobs that I loved. And I also knew that, come next July, I would have insurance again through SAG because I'd come home and do audiobooks again and whatever. But if I had not had to stay home and had all these publishers reach out and say, hey, do you have a home studio now? Because we have work for you. Then my insurance would have ended on July 1st, and I would not have had insurance for a year. So I am really grateful to a certain extent for the pandemic, not only because I was able to work so that I could get insurance, but also because it has changed me in a way that I don't think I would have changed like this had it not happened, had we not been shut down. And the Reparations Show would surely not have come into my life. And the Reparations Show is, with the exception of my partner and my cats, the best thing in my life right now. you know,